Imagine spending nearly a decade chasing one dream, failing again and again but refusing to give up. Now picture doing this while juggling night shifts, family expectations, and a demanding job, just to have a chance at shaping the future of India's forests. This isn't a movie script. This is the real story of Amrish Yadav, and it's also a window into a much deeper crisis facing one of India's most critical yet overlooked institutions, the Indian Forest Service. Today we'll explore the hidden battleground where bureaucracy, technology, and climate change collide. Are India's forests protected by outdated traditions or poised for radical transformation? And what can the journey of a single, relentless officer like Amrish tell us about the fate of an entire ecosystem, and perhaps the economics of the nation itself? If you care about the intersection of technology, environment, and human ambition, stick with us. What's happening behind the scenes of the IFS might not just impact the trees. It could shape India's energy future, its rural prosperity, and even global climate targets. To understand how India's Forest Administration has reached this turning point, we need a crash course in what the Indian Forest Service really is, why it matters, and what's at stake if it fails, or succeeds in reinventing itself. The Indian Forest Service, or IFS, was officially established in 1966, inheriting not just the scientific forest management legacy of the Imperial Forest Service, but also decades of complex law, tradition, and responsibility. At first glance, their mandate is straightforward: safeguard India's forests, wildlife, and biodiversity. But in reality, they sit at the volatile intersection of rural livelihoods, multi-billion-dollar timber and forest produce markets, climate policy, and age-old community rights. They police illegal logging in one moment, then negotiate with international climate financiers the next. It's a job that demands both boots-on-the-ground grit and policy vision. Fast forward to today. India, a nation of 1.4 billion people, is at a dramatic juncture. Forest and tree cover stands at about 25% of land area, a huge carbon sink storing over 7.9 billion tons of CO2. On paper, things seem to be improving. The State of Forest Report 2021 shows incremental gains in canopy cover, and big government promises echo from Delhi about even more green missions, like the goal to plant or improve 10 million hectares of forest. But dig deeper, and the cracks begin to show. Deforestation is accelerating in key biodiversity hotspots, particularly in the Northeast. A 2024 report by the Forest Survey of India revealed a staggering 15% spike in forest fires, mainly driven by changing rainfall patterns and rising temperatures linked to climate change. Human-wildlife conflicts have become more frequent and deadly, and while carbon emissions dipped by nearly 8% in 2020, experts argue this was due more to pandemic lockdowns than sustainable policy shifts. Let's take one example: Project Tiger, hailed as a global conservation success. Bharat Jyoti, director of India's National Forest Academy, says, "Project Tiger is a vehicle for ecological conservation, but broader strategies are desperately needed. The battle is no longer just about protecting charismatic megafauna. It's about defending livelihoods, combating organized crime, and adapting to a fast-changing climate." Now picture the life of an IFS officer, someone like Amrish Yadav, who was born into a humble family in rural Uttar Pradesh. Raised among government workers, he dreamed of joining the top ranks of Indian bureaucracy. Instead of opting for a lucrative job after his B.Tech from IIT Guwahati, he persevered through the infamously difficult Union Public Service Commission exams, 7 attempts in all. That's 7 years facing rejection, studying up to 5 hours a day after grueling night shifts as a railway station master. He drew inspiration and guidance from officers like Pratik Jain and tapped into digital platforms for self-study and community learning. Even after clearing the preliminary and main exams 3 times, he repeatedly missed the final interview cut. Yet, where most would quit, he doubled down, finally cracking the Indian Forest Service in 2024, ranked 72nd nationwide. "Finally, all my hard work has paid off," he said. "But I guess my family and friends are happier than me. They've seen the sacrifices." Amrish's path reflects a broader truth. India's top talent is still drawn to state service, sacrificing easier lives for a shot at national impact. But as the forest landscape changes, can institutionally bound, tradition-steeped agencies like the IFS harness the skills, tech, and willpower needed to fight new-age threats? Let's look at the numbers. The Green Skill Development Program, launched in 2017, promised to mobilize over 500,000 new environmental jobs. Yet, the real on-the-ground transformation remains spotty. Meanwhile, the economic stakes have never been higher. Forestry-related CSR investments now exceed 500 crore rupees annually, and forest-derived products fuel both local economies and global supply chains. But it's not just about money or resources, it's about relevance. The IFS was built for a different era, one of timber extraction, fire suppression, and exclusive state authority. Yet 21st century challenges are messy. Deforestation is driven not just by illegal loggers, but by shifting cultivation, infrastructure projects, and heartbreaking poverty. Meanwhile, community rights over forests have become a major legal and political battleground. Can the IFS still be the ringmaster, or must it reinvent itself as a partner among many? B.V. Umadavi, a senior IFS officer, puts it bluntly, biodiversity loss is now inseparable from climate change. Forest officers must approach these challenges as scientists and social leaders, not just administrators. The line between wildlife, climate, and people is vanishing. Another expert, Sanjeev Chaturvedi, has called for a single accountable agency at the district level to manage air, water, climate, and biodiversity as one system, an idea both radical and highly controversial. Can the sprawling, hierarchical IFS ever become that nimble? The ground realities are alarming. The India State of Forest report points to vanishing forests in tribal majority areas, and climate models warn of even fiercer fires and heat waves ahead. Communities living in and around forests often see state agencies as adversaries, not allies. Previous top-down conservation tactics, though well-intentioned, have sometimes resulted in local resentment, protests, and even violence. Yet there are glimmers of hope. Officers like Vanjulavalli Sridhar in Andhra Pradesh have slashed human-animal conflict by 40%, not through policing, but by involving local communities directly in wildlife monitoring and resource management. These bottom-up solutions suggest an emerging blueprint, but they remain the exception. Amid all this, the world is watching. India's commitments under the Paris Agreement rest heavily on its ability to hold and boost forest carbon stocks. Failure would mean not just domestic trouble, but loss of credibility and billions in international green finance. So here's the central tension. The Indian Forest Service holds the keys to an ecological and economic treasure chest. But legacy approaches are visibly faltering, and both climate change and a booming population are raising the stakes exponentially. The institution needs to pivot towards both radical reform and bold innovation. Can the IFS harness the kinds of disruptive technologies, like AI-driven monitoring, satellite analytics, and green finance, that the rest of the world is experimenting with? Can officers like Amrish translate their hard-won determination into large-scale impact amidst institutional inertia? Or will the bureaucracy's roots prove too deep for real change to take hold? As we move into the next chapter, we'll dive even deeper. What would a truly reimagined Indian Forest Service look like? How could India unite grassroots participation, cutting-edge tech, and bold policy to protect both its forests and its future prosperity? Stay with us, because the answers may surprise you, and they could shape the green legacy not just of one nation, but the world. Let's rejoin Amrish Yadav's story, not just as a tale of personal triumph, but as a reflection of what the Indian Forest Service and India's forests might become. Over the past few decades, India's green cover has, on paper, increased. But that headline masks a far more complex reality. Forests are under pressure as never before. Climate change is accelerating wildfires. A forest survey report in 2024 found a 15% rise in incidents. The Northeast, a biodiversity hotspot, is losing forest at an alarming rate. Meanwhile, rising human populations, development pressures, and the specter of encroachment make the IFS's job ever more challenging. But the existential crisis for the IFS is also a crossroads, a moment thick with both risk and incredible opportunity. What would it mean if the IFS doubled down on tradition, doing what's always been done, relying on top-down control, and seeing forests mainly as government territory? In this scenario, deforestation could accelerate. Human-wildlife conflict, like we've seen in Andhra Pradesh, could erupt into full-blown crisis. Rural communities, left out of the process, might see forests as something imposed upon them, not resources to be cherished, but obstacles to development, or worse, targets for illegal exploitation. But let's imagine another future. Suppose IFS officers embrace technology, the kind that's already changing conservation globally. Artificial intelligence is no longer science fiction. Machine learning can comb through satellite data to spot illegal logging in real time, or even predict where a forest fire might start days before the first spark. Drones patrol vast reserves, feeding live imagery to command centers. With these tools, a single officer's reach multiplies 100-fold. Yet technology alone can't save forests. The real game changer? Community collaboration. Look at the legacy of Vanjulavali Sridhar in Andhra Pradesh. By working hand-in-hand with villagers, her team cut human-animal conflict by 40%. Locals became not just eyes and ears on the ground, but passionate stewards, because they had a stake, a voice, and crucially, economic incentives. Imagine this approach scaled nationwide. Millions trained through the Green Skill Development Program, forest-dependent families becoming guardians of the landscape, invested in its survival and their own future. Policy also has a vital role. Experts like ID Pandey argue that only rigorous, on-the-ground inspection, supported by smart technology, can curb illegal encroachment and poaching. Others, such as Sanjeev Chaturvedi, push for a single, unified authority for forests, water, and climate, cutting bureaucracy, boosting accountability. And there's a new player at the table, the private sector. Corporate social responsibility investments now exceed INR 500 crore annually. Green bonds are on the rise, channeling private capital into ambitious reforestation projects. The era of treating forests as only a government responsibility is over, if, and only if, policy reforms and institutional change allow new partnerships to flourish. But even the best plans face hard truths. Forest fires are growing more frequent and intense, fueled by a warming climate. Biodiversity loss is a ticking time bomb, threatening ecosystem collapse. And new research shows that ground-level implementation, the daily grind of officers like Amrish Yadav, remains the crucial bottleneck. Will the IFS seize this moment, or will inertia and red tape win the day? For viewers, this isn't just a distant bureaucratic drama. Forests matter to every Indian. They store nearly 8 billion tons of carbon, buffer cities against heat, protect water sources, and harbor countless species. When forests falter, rural livelihoods, national development, and the stability of the climate itself hang in the balance. Let's turn to practical lessons and what this all means for us. First, forest conservation isn't the job of just a few thousand officers. It's a national project, requiring everyone from tech startups to rural youth to get involved. What can you do? If you're a student, the Green Skill Development Program is open to you. This government initiative aims to train hundreds of thousands in jobs like nursery raising, wild animal tracking, composting, and ecotourism. These aren't just careers, they're roles on the front lines of climate action. If you work in tech, there's a golden opportunity to build apps, AI algorithms, or software that makes monitoring, reporting, and managing forests faster and more transparent. Imagine designing a tool that lets villagers report a forest fire from their phones, or blockchain systems that track the supply chain of forest products. Are you a business owner or investor? Green bonds and CSR initiatives are not only socially responsible, they're profitable too. Funding reforestation or sustainable enterprises in forest areas is a chance to invest in India's long-term ecological and economic stability. But perhaps most importantly, every citizen can participate in community-based conservation. This means supporting joint forest management groups, advocating for responsible development, and choosing products certified as sustainable. The next time you buy paper, timber, or herbal medicines, ask where it came from. Demand accountability, transparency, and respect for both forest and forest people. And let's not forget the lesson from Amrish Yadav's relentless pursuit of his dream. Transforming the IFS won't happen overnight. It will demand patience, resilience, and a commitment to public service, a mindset every Indian can, and should, adopt when thinking about our forests. Now, as we reach the end, let's answer the big question. Can the Indian Forest Service rise to the challenge? Can it combine the power of new technology, the wisdom of policy reform, and the vigor of community involvement to face its greatest test? The answer, if history and current momentum are any guide, is yes, but only if it's willing to disrupt itself. The seeds of reform are already visible. Officers like Vanjulavali Sridhar and Amrish Yadav show how determination and openness to new ideas can produce real change. CSR funding, green bonds, and the GSDP hold immense promise. But the secret fact, one rarely discussed in public debates, is that the single most powerful asset the IFS possesses isn't technology or even policy, it's trust. When officers build genuine partnerships with local communities, when they listen and empower, forests flourish. It's this social capital, painstakingly built through patience, that will decide whether India's forests recover or decline. So, what can you do right now? Start small. Volunteer for a plantation drive. Learn about your local forests. Ask your elected representatives how they're supporting forest officers and communities. And if you're dreaming of a career in public service, remember Amrish's story. Perseverance can move mountains and forests. Let's keep this conversation alive. If you've learned something new or want to share your experiences with India's forests, drop a comment below. Like and subscribe for more in-depth stories not just about India's wild spaces, but the people committed to their future. Together we can ensure that the Indian